hug. Welcome to Reimagining You the Pilates Way. In today's episode, we're continuing our theme of motivation and are very excited to welcome to the podcast someone who embodies the definition of motivation. Pilates teacher and businesswoman, the wonderful Whitney Vavel. Whitney truly believes in healing through movement and that Pilates should be a positive movement experience for everyone. Whitney's life changed 12 years ago when she suffered back and neck injuries from a car accident. As a result, Pilates became a new way of life and an essential ingredient in pain management for Whitney. So let's talk about how Pilates can take us from pain to feeling well again.
It was fine. There we go. Okay.
So we need to wait.
Yeah. Save. Oh shit, where did they go? Fine. All right, hang on. Not there we need to be. Not there. It's there. Okay, cool. Are we ready?
Yep. Welcome, Whitney. This has been a long time coming, and we're so excited and thrilled to have you here today.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
This is so awesome. It's great to have the opportunity to have a guest and someone who's so fabulous as yourself, Whitney.
I was thinking back to when I first met you, Whitney, and I actually think it was when Claire's mentor, Lolita San Miguel, first generation Pilates teacher, came to Leeds, and I think it was nearly 4 years ago.
Oh my goodness, it was. It was right before we had the COVID lockdown. It literally was.
I think it was even further before then, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, about 2018, something like that. Yeah. And I started off, I think I did some of your very early morning Pilates classes during the lockdown, the 7 a.m.s, the 6:45s.
They get you inspired and get you started classes.
Yeah.
And get going.
Yeah, and now I'm a convert to your energetic reformer Pilates classes. But what I don't know is how you met Whitney, Claire.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
That's been a while.
it has.
Yeah, so I got an email out of the blue from my auntie telling me that there was a pole star, soon to be graduate, coming to the Yorkshire area. Would I have space to mentor? And there we are. I said, well, of course, this is great. We don't have enough teachers in Leeds anyway. So it was a joy to meet you. So Shelley, who's leads the education for Polestar, who we are trained with and who we teach for and I teach for. And she said, you know, could you help Whitney? And then they were
Find my feet when I landed over in Harrogate.
and that's what happened. That's what happened. So Whitney came over and we started working together, and then you went away again.
Well, I think we were still back and forth, Robin and I. So my husband is from Harrogate, and at the time I was still based in Miami. And yes, so we knew that we were going to be expecting and moving. So I think Shelley was sort of planting some seeds at that point in time for me.
Yeah, so you came for a bit, went away, did your exam, came back, and I went, oh, so now you're back. Will you come and play and work with us at the studio?
And I was excited. Yeah. So it's a true honor to be so close to Claire, who has such a range of expertise and is, yes, such a pleasure to work with.
Oh, wow. I'm really glad I asked that. I didn't know that story. So, Whitney, I'd like to start by you taking us back to the beginning of your Pilates journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered Pilates? What was it that motivated you to start?
Well, I was in a car accident, and listen, I backtrack even before that. I was always interested in Pilates, and I had seen the TV commercials, infomercials, Marie Windsor.
Oh, yes.
And so I bought the DVD sets. And I did those at home. Is it Kathy Windsor? Is that it? Or
No,
Mary?
Windsor, you're
Mary.
absolutely
Okay, I was just getting the names mixed up. And so, yeah, I was doing the at home Pilates, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it felt good. It felt different. Then fast forward, I was in a car accident, and then I really needed to find
Oh, yeah.
something that was going to help. And I'd heard Pilates was going to do that. So I started some classes, but it wasn't really until, unfortunately, I had to have a spinal fusion. And then, unfortunately, that surgery failed. And that failure led me to Brent Anderson, Dr. Brent Anderson, who's one of the co-founders of Full Star Pilates. And they said, go see him. And he became my physical therapist. And his team worked with me to try to get me healing and moving better. And so that's when I really fell in love with a much richer, deeper, more educated experience of Pilates rather than a fitness class. It's a big difference.
Massive difference.
But it's hard to explain that because it's like you have to feel it in your body. Like
it's one of the constant things we're challenged by, isn't it? Is how do you explain the difference between just doing some kind of fitness Pilates or going to the gym and the expert tuition that you give and that we give here?
Well, I think it also stems from the fact that Dr. Brent Anderson is a PhD in physical therapy, and the training stems from a more of a rehabilitative and mindful and sensible approach to create healing, movement, stability, and longevity based on whatever situation. And in my case, it was my L5-S1 and problems with my neck as well.
So I need to unpack this.
Yeah, there's so many things we both want to unpack.
So the first one, and I'm sure everyone else knows this, but what is a spinal fusion surgery?
It's a fancy name for 4 screws, 2 titanium rods, a cage, and at the base of my spine that is supposed to realign the vertebrae that had been moved and was compressing the root nerve in the base of my spine. So that's the mechanical.
People at home are like wincing right now listening to this. That's a lot of pain from that. And the surgery is massively invasive.
It's not supposed to be, but mine was designed to be the minimally invasive version. And it was a TLIF, which came in from the side, which was supposed to be less invasive. In retrospect, perhaps we should have gone for more of a invasive full spinal fusion because mine failed, which was devastating because the bone didn't grow the way that it was supposed to. So it's kind of like, think of a chair.
Yeah.
And you've got 4 legs. That's the goal. Well, mine maybe has 2. And so the base of my spine is constantly negotiating and trying to stabilize with other, tissues, other muscles. And so it's kind of a miracle that, in fact, it's a miracle. The doctors can't believe that I'm doing as well as I am today. Every single surgeon, every single doctor said, you're going to have a revision surgery. And thank you to Pilates, I've been able to hold off. Now it'll be 10 years. January, was it 13th since I've had my surgery.
Wow.
And did you have the surgery immediately afterwards, or was it sometime after you realized there was a problem?
Oh no, it was a while after, because I thought it was just soft tissue injuries and whiplash, which I'd had before, so I was very familiar with. But then something moved in the base of my spine, and then I knew there was a much bigger problem, and that's where we learned I had something called spondylolisthesis, which I didn't even know what was. I couldn't even pronounce it. And that's where the vertebrae moved forward and began to compress the nerves. And that's when things got really tricky. So that's when we had to start seeing the doctors on a much more serious level. And that's when we determined that the spinal fusion was supposed to be the best route for me.
Oh, okay, but it didn't work.
No. Not exactly the way it was supposed to.
Not the way it was meant to.
No, so but the blessing in this whole in this whole, let's call it a course correction, know,
Mhm.
nothing happens by accident,
Mm.
is that I have found my feet with Pilates. I have now completely redirected my entire, life to work in health and wellness through Pilates, and then also through my coaching and mindfulness workshops and courses that I teach. So, you have to look at the blessings when something
Yeah.
doesn't work out. I mean, I wouldn't.
And you're also, I mean, you're in such a great position, even although the surgery has, not been as effective as it was hoped it would be. But look at how many people you've been able to help. You've managed to kind of show the doctors actually how much the work of doing Pilates in your body can keep you strong and flexible and able to manage.
Absolutely. And if it weren't for the morning practices, then I do. And the fact that Pilates literally keeps me going, gets me going. And it is through the movement, which I know that is one of the things that you wanted to speak about today. If it weren't for that.
And we've talked about on previous episodes those aha moments, because I think it's fair to say for most people, and you mentioned you started off with the videos, that it takes some time to really get Pilates. It's usually not right away. What was it like for you? When did Pilates become a bigger part of your life? When did you realize that? Did you have an aha moment, or was it gradual?
It was kind of a mix, actually. I mean, I was going through such a personal, honestly, it was one hot mess when I found out my back surgery had failed. I found out that we had wanted to have a baby of our own, and that dream had just been thrown out the window because I was supposed to wait a year to be able to try to go for IVF treatments because they needed my spine to be fused. And that was just devastating for me. And, because I was like, well, now what, But honestly, when I found Polestar and I met Brent Anderson, I met Christy Idavoy, I met the whole team, right? And it wasn't just one person, it was literally that group effort, starting with some restorative movements, starting with some, gyrotonics, starting with, just the Feldenkrais methods, which was like nerve glides, and knowing that there was a safe way to enter into movement, because at that point in time, there was a lot of fear that I was going to do something wrong that was going to take me down a much worse course. And so having that expertise really made a difference.
I think that fear is really true and present for many people, not even in such an extreme situation as yourself, where smaller injuries that feel big to people create that fear of and not knowing, because we're not educated in movement and what's safe and what's okay, and that actually movement heals and movement is healthy for us. So I think that people that are listening today are going to really, really resonate with that.
Well, and it's finding, I think what's so important, is there an aha moment? I think it was like, there is a whole school of education behind this methodology that I didn't know about. I had no idea there was actually a man named Joseph Pilates. I had no idea. Right. I had no idea that, he had worked with, these injured veterans. I had no idea that he had rehabilitated so many people, and that the methodology had evolved like it has over the years with the equipment, with the apparatus, and then gone from, then working with myofascial release and working with Carol Davis and working with her mentees as well. So it was really a comprehensive approach with the movement, with massage, with myofascial release, because, when there is an acute injury, there's a lot of other things that can happen, both physically and mentally. And by working with that team to be able to go in and to release the iliopsoas, to be able to release the QLs and work on not just one area, but the whole body, made the difference. So I would say that was a real aha. I mean, the first time that I actually went through, one of these more like intense sessions, I couldn't even stand up. I could barely walk out of there because it had like rearranged my whole,
Wow.
yeah, they wouldn't let me leave until they knew I was safe to drive. And I literally had to pull over like 3 or 4 times to even get home. That's how much stuff was going on in my body and the scar tissue, and it's like rearranging everything from the inside
It's
out.
amazing hearing you speak, to look at you now and see how vivacious you are and vibrant you are, and the how much movement you do in your life, how much teaching you do, how much you give to others. To think about, you know, all that you've gone through and put into yourself to get to where you are now is phenomenal.
Thank you. I think it, you know, like I said, these things don't happen by accident. Perhaps this was the catalyst that allows me now to hopefully be a better teacher.
For sure.
So that's where,
Yeah,
I think the next question.
Yeah, it's one thing to train and be a customer, isn't it? But to me, it's quite a leap to then train to be a teacher. What motivated you to train?
Well, so I mentioned that my husband and I wanted to have children, and because of my spine condition, it really wasn't, I wasn't able to carry a child on, you know, in my current state. And so we had to get very creative and ended up going through IVF and looked into the surrogacy route. And the long story for another day, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But we found out we were expecting, not with one baby, but with 2, which was very, very exciting and shocking.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I was still struggling to even lift a bag because the imbalance of having injuries in the neck on the left side and problems mostly on the right side of the spine, you know, carrying even a purse, carrying, you know, lifting anything could really put my back into a bad place. So I think I called or messaged Brent and said, we've got news. I said, what do you know, he's like, well, I think I'm gonna need some Pilates boot camp to get me strong. He's like, well, you love Pilates. And I think we had a session and he started talking to me about it. He's like, you love Pilates, you're pretty good at it. And we got a training course coming up.
Yeah.
And he's like, why don't you do the training course? I'm like, what? I was like, are you kidding me? He's like, no. He's like, you know, this is you wanted a baby boot camp. This is it. And then I was like, let that sink in. I was like, what? And I went home and I was like, is he out of his mind? You know, and then next thing you know, I started talking to the team and I was like, okay, I'm doing this for me to build my strength up, to build my confidence up. And then as I started going through the program, I realized, you know what, I love this. I love teaching.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, you know, I had a background in gymnastics. I used to teach gymnastics. I was a cheerleader. I used to teach swimming. I used to teach in the classroom. I was an instructor of entrepreneurship and small business. So it's like, that's part of my makeup, but I had never envisioned
Isn't that
this
amazing?
would be, you know, what led me to what I'm doing now. So that's how it started.
Oh, that's amazing. And Claire, you've trained and mentored many Pilates teachers. Is there a common motivation to become a Pilates teacher in your experience? Does it tend to appeal to people whom Pilates might have helped heal an injury?
For sure. I mean, there absolutely is a trend because so many stories, even my own, are like Whitney's, where we've had a life-changing experience from Pilates personally. We've had a real deep love for it. It's made that difference to us. There is definitely a trend of getting out of some kind of injury or health condition and then going, I want to do that for everybody. You know, once you want to feel better, you feel better, and then you go, no, I want to feel better. So you want to go into the training so that you can help more people. I mean, when I did Pilates, first off, I didn't even know it was called Pilates. It was body conditioning for dancers. I just did it because that's what you did. It's part of the start of your day, your class, whatever. And then when I had my knee injuries, I just resented it. I didn't like it because I wanted to dance so much. And then it wasn't until I could feel and see in other people's reaction to my dancing ability, having done the rigorous Pilates rehab, that I was like, oh, there's something in this. And it was like a switch went off, and I loved it from that moment on.
Yeah, and so
Think
you
a
want to
lot of people-
spread the good
Yeah.
gospel.
Yeah, exactly.
And what was next for you, Whitney, after you'd done the course, initial course?
Well, I hadn't, it just kind of, everything just started happening because as part of the Polestar training, I think you have to do, 100 training
Yeah.
hours and teaching hours. And so I had gotten a reformer at my house, but then I was also teaching at Polestar Education in Miami, and I started teaching classes there. And I loved the difference it was making for people, like people who were walking in, feeling maybe a little depressed, achy, and then walking out with like, a skip in their step and all happy. And you're just like, I did, how I had a one tiny little piece of, role in that. And it's just, it's addictive. When you could actually physically see the changes in one class.
Yeah.
And then you see people's attitude shift, you see their energy shift. And, when you do Pilates, you do life better. It's like it can translate into a new job, a new relationship, being able to do more with your kids or with your grandchildren. I mean, it makes everything better. And that's on a large scale, but then you look at like even more specifics, working with, athletes who are, and when I was in Miami with Polestar, I mean, there were professional athletes that were coming in and training. I mean, some big names and, big golfers, big tennis players, and there's lots of information out there now. And to think that some of them say that doing the reformer and the studio Pilates is their secret weapon.
Oh, it is. I mean, right across the board, so many sports people now can't be without it because it is a secret weapon. We have that secret weapon.
Exactly. Well, David Beckham is one who
Yes.
that he did an hour of reformer Pilates every day, and he swears that it added 5 additional years to his career.
It's something, isn't it? When you think about it.
Isn't it? And to both of you, I'm pretty sure Pilates teacher training isn't a once and done. Where does
That's hilarious.
So you've done your training and that was it. You went off to teach.
Well, we should say not for us. For many instructors, it might be,
Okay.
but not for
For us.
So where does professional development fit into your lives as teachers?
it's ongoing.
Forever. It is absolutely a constant and it's non-stop. And I take great pride in being very open about continuing my education for not having all the answers. And I share with the team here and with the people that I mentor internationally that I'm still learning too. And it's really important to still learn. And I think for all of us, we kind of find an avenue or two that really sparks an interest. So for me, of course, it's pelvic health, but it's also coaching and business as well. So then you go down that avenue of training and you explore it. So we've done so much more advanced anatomy training, and we bring the course here. So we have Natural Bodies who comes in, it's Gary Carter that runs that, and it's up to the minute from the research, from the lab to the studio. So there's no middleman, there's nothing in between. We can
It's
literally
cutting edge.
take,
It's literally cutting edge.
cutting edge, literally, from the lab to the studio. So we have the luxury, and I do say this because a lot of people will be going to clinicians or medical professionals who have so many hoops, so many barriers, so many boxes to tick to get that research that we have the luxury of taking immediately into action. It can take up to 10 years for research to get to the front line of the NHS. They are working their tails off, and we have the luxury. We can just do it straight away. So I do feel really it's important to say that, and we are blessed, and the people that come feel that difference, don't they? That we can do.
Well, I think that's evident in how you run this particular studio. And that is one of the things that has attracted me to continue working with you, because that is a really important part of the journey.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm a forever student, I'm a teacher, but a forever student. And one of my favorite classes in university was the history and philosophy of science. And what you know today is not what is going to be known, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And for me, the special interest is really working with people with chronic pain, because I know that I wouldn't be doing as well as I am without the Pilates. And to know that there's, 60 to 80% of, adults walking around here in the UK and across the world that will be, unfortunately, dealing with some kind of chronic pain or back pain in their lives, and that 120 million working days are lost due to back pain. And to think that if we could get people into a Pilates studio, into one of our classes or one of our sessions, to help prevent and future-proof people's bodies, that's where I want to take, my message.
For sure. And we have a responsibility. We've talked about this on the podcast before, about future-proofing and about us having taking charge of our own body and our own health, so that we can take responsibility to future-proof ourselves and seek out those opportunities like doing Pilates that will help us to take care of our body for the future, because it does. And you're walking, talking evidence of it, an inspiration for so many other people.
Well, and I think it's with the clients that we work with here in group classes, you don't get as much of a one-to-one, but we try to, break it as much as we can, but then really working with the clients on a one-to-one basis and seeing, from some of them walking in with, could barely stand up in pain to now are out running marathons, some of them, or, going skiing. And it's just, those are big deals for me.
Yeah.
But some of it's that walking through the door in pain, because it might be a belief that you don't move if you've got chronic pain.
Right. And that's where I think your original question came.
Yeah.
So how do you dispel that myth? Well, we heal through movement. Movement heals. I think we have to keep preaching. We have to keep practicing. We have to keep showing the results. And
it's clearer now, and even the NICE guidelines have moved on, that the idea of lying down and being still, if we use the example of the chronic low back pain, it's really clear now that gentle movement is necessary and suggested. And people don't necessarily know that Pilates would fall into that category, because we don't know what's out there and
you don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
So Whitney, Claire and I were chatting last week about finding the right Pilates teacher. Can be such a motivation if you find the one for you, not only to come to class, but maybe to work a little bit harder while you're there. And as you know, I'm a convert to your Tuesday night reformer class at Chapel Allerton Pilates for I was trying to think how long, maybe about 6 months.
Oh, it's been longer.
I think it's, maybe, yeah. So I would say you and Claire bring a very similar level of energy to the classes. And yeah, your teaching styles are different, but I can't really put my finger on how. How would you describe your teaching style? Do you have a particular technique you would use to motivate customers in your class?
I think it really depends on the class. It depends on who's in the class. It depends on the personalities in the class. I mean, a beginner class is very different than the way I would teach a more dynamic class, which you've now fallen into by default. And, that's a really interesting question.
I think one of your skills is actually how you adapt to each individual. So you kind of naturally step into the role that person needs you to and that's not to say, if somebody's a bit low, that you go low, you pick them up if they need to be picked up, but you definitely draw people out in the way that you interact with them in classes.
And I think perhaps, my coaching background might also play into it, because I want everybody to feel better after the class than compared to when they walked in. And I want people to really notice that physically, mentally, and emotionally, So throughout the class, I try to pepper in a few things to kind of anchor that experience. And whether that creates the results, or if that's part of it, it's hard to say, really.
Yeah. I once said that we teach people, not Pilates, and I think you're the embodiment of that. That when you're teaching the people so uniquely to what they need. Pilates is just the awesome thing that makes people feel better, but it's how you teach the individual.
Yeah, and I try not to get too hung up on all the technicalities and make sure that they're just moving. Like let's just, because sometimes people, oh, am I doing it right? You're moving, it's good. We'll continue to improve. Well, this isn't practice makes perfect. It's
just practice. And also it's the idea that we are the judge and jury on what's right or not. Yeah. Does it feel good to them?
How does it feel in your body? Does it feel like it's making a difference? What
we can do is empower people, give people the opportunities to learn more about themselves. If people continue to rely on us to say, do it like this, what's right, what's wrong, and they're not actually learning their own body and their own movement and their own ups and downs.
Exactly. And that leads to another point, which is that's a great motivator for me, is to see how people become so much more aware of how they appear in the world, how they walk around in the world, instead of, having, after a first session that like, I noticed that my right side is just a little weaker, or I'm standing more on this hip. Like, well, it's like, to me, I'm like, why didn't you notice that before? But it's bringing these little bitty tools to the forefront that people become more aware
when you ask
of their alignment.
Yeah, when you ask someone in class, when you're peppering in, notice this. How does it feel now that you've done one side before you do the other side? things like that. That's teaching them to then notice in everyday life, which is, I always think it's such a win when somebody comes in and said, oh, I noticed when I was stood at the kitchen sink this or that. You have taught them to feel their own body.
And Whitney told me to breathe tonight. I'd forgotten.
Well, we need to breathe. It's, the first act of life and the last. We don't want that to be in one of my classes. Please
not. Please not.
Favorite type of class to teach? Is it reformer mat, Pilates gym, spring wall, one-to-ones?
You know what? I love it all for different reasons. I don't think I have a favorite. I love it all, honestly.
So I'll ask it in a different way. What makes a rewarding class for you?
When people literally feel like they've learned something new, different, or experienced something different in their bodies. That to me is like, wow. Like when you did today, you were doing the kneeling cat with the rotation. And you literally said, you were like, I feel different. And you were trying to verbalize it.
I had a moment, I couldn't.
The great thing about Pilates and the movement that we're doing is that we are moving every element of you. So your viscera, your organs, we're moving that. Your nervous system is being affected. Everything is being affected. And so whether you can name what it is that you notice or just that I'm different, that's a massive one, isn't that?
It is. And I think on to that point, when you go to do Pilates, we're not just moving you physically, but it is the mental and the emotional, because we're working with your brain. Okay, when we're teaching someone to fire and wire and get the coordination going, well, that's laying new neural pathways that helps people start to react better, think quicker. It opens things up so that you feel lighter, more connected, taller. It's just,
you're more responsive to your life and the world. That you've got answers to questions that you might not have had before. It's fantastic.
And I learned in a previous episode that Claire does somebody else's class and is a customer. Never occurred to me before. Do you do any classes at all, Whitney, as a customer?
I love doing Claire's classes.
Good answer.
Well done. And that is one of the challenges of being an instructor, is making time for your own practice. So I know that by booking in, then I know that I will definitely get my session in just for me.
You're coming to class with me on Monday.
Monday, that's right. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
very
didn't know
exciting.
that. I
Very,
didn't
very
know that.
exciting. Yes.
So Whitney, I want to circle back now to your story, your journey, whatever we're going to call it. And you mentioned you're obviously mum to twins,
Yes.
boy, girl, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. And Claire and I chatted in a previous episode on motherhood about the sheer physical demands of children. Mental as well, but the sheer physical demands. And for me, that was a massive shock after I had my first son. Being shattered from sleepless nights. And I can remember feeling exhausted anyway before having to lug all the equipment around the pram, the bag, the car seat. And that must have been doubled for you.
Yeah.
So what I'm interested to know is, did your needs from your Pilates practice change at that time? Did it exacerbate any existing pain that you might have been experiencing?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Okay. Go.
So, yes and yes, Pilates did change, and it became like it's like my savior. It was like what I needed every day to find that peace and that rebalance, that energy in my body to be able to just cope. But, in my situation, because I wasn't able to lift and hold and carry more than 5 pounds, unfortunately, it was a very humbling experience, and it still is in many ways, but I'm in a much better place now. But I had to, I had to get help. We had to have full-time help and have a live-in nanny with us, because there were times where I couldn't be lifting and changing and car seats and whatever it was. So, but through the years, I have gotten stronger and I've gotten smarter about my movements too. So I think it's learning. I mean, I remember way back when I could never lift a jump board ever. Now it's still not great, but I can do it because I know how to move better and smarter.
Okay.
But it's still not great to do. And I certainly wouldn't be doing it on a repetitive basis. It's like as and when, but the Pilates helps you be able to respond in more dynamic ways. Is that
definitely.
communicating?
And also what I witnessed, if it's okay to share, what I really witnessed was that as the 20s were getting bigger and they were changing, your needs and your approach to your Pilates practice really changed a lot, but it was so responsive. So every time we worked together, because we worked together a lot through that early time, and it was, well, today we're at this point, so we needed to do this repertoire of exercises. Today we're at this point, so we need to do this. And it was never the same more than once, but your body just got that little taste of what it needed
if I was
you
up with the babies in the night or whatever, and my neck and my shoulders were really achy, then maybe we worked on, I don't know, supine scaps or more release techniques that would allow me to unravel. But it's again, working with the right instructor and the right training to know how to do that. That's we've got here with Claire. So that's, she's like a walking encyclopedia of these different tools, tips. So
What was it about Pilates that particularly helped? Is there an example you could give of something that really improved?
Well, my ability to sit has improved dramatically. I mean, from the beginning, I couldn't sit more than 5-10 minutes.
Wow.
Oh no. And I mean, perhaps it's partly time, and maybe the bones grew in a different way. And, I've had a lot of different treatments and things, but I think strengthening, all of the Pilates will help strengthen.
And it's strengthening locally from the inside out. And I think that's a key difference, isn't it? Whereas if you're doing general strength work, it's working more of those outside, closer to the surface muscles. And
I think perhaps what just came up for me is that in the past, I mean, I used to do aerobics and, step aerobics and spin classes. I used to love to, jog a bit, and all that high impact stuff had to go out the window.
And you've done gymnastics as well.
A lot, once upon a time. And learning that, well, this is something you particularly taught me, was to slow down, and that unraveling, releasing work is so much more important to then allow your body just to kind of find that homeostasis, to then be able to start moving more freely and add on with the layering of the strengthening, the toning, or whatever movement needs to happen.
Mhm.
But it took a long time for me to really get that, because my type A personality,
Yeah.
the person I used to be, want to just go do.
Mhm.
And I had to learn the lesson the hard way, that my body's like not letting me do that anymore.
Mhm.
It's saying, sorry, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna, and so I think there was the physical pains, but then also I had to deal with the mental and the emotional side. Okay, well, this is my new path. Let's try it. Let's give it a go and see. And now it's become a way of life. That's why I'm teaching my morning classes. I teach, morning classes that I'm now really, it's not only for me, but it's for everybody, but focusing more on like healthy spine. It's great for anybody with chronic pain, arthritis, anybody who's kind of struggles, in the morning, just to get up and go without.
So many people, it's a very, very common complaint that people have, that they wake up in the morning and they feel creaky. It takes them half an hour to get their spine moving, to feel like they can do anything, or longer, but before they can do anything, which is why Whitney does early morning classes online, so that people can literally crawl from their bed onto their mat.
I mean,
And that's the thing.
I've done that in pajamas. It doesn't matter.
Because it sets your spine up
for
success, for a healthy day, and for ease of movement and pain-free movement too. So
if you can do something early morning,
yep,
it makes a
that will make
huge
the difference
difference
to your
if
day.
you suffer from chronic pain.
Particularly if, I presume, if you've been sedentary in the night and you've just been lying in one.
Well, I don't know many people who are like walking around at night. Do you?
No.
but it's
I mean, there might some. It's just, but I get what you're saying. But
That you're not necessarily not moving or
what
twisting
happens
or...
in the night is that we regenerate the fluid in our spine, so we wake up and it doesn't move as much because there's more fluid there. It's puffed up, so we can feel more stiff. And some people are more inclined to more stiffness if they have arthritis or an autoimmune condition, for example. They will wake up, that stiffness actually also results in pain, and the way to be able to be pain-free is to move, and sometimes that feels so back to front that you have to move to get out of pain,
and you have to move through the pain. Now, I think another common default for many, and this is, not so much the fault of the public, but it's the medical practice of, what do you do when you're pain? Well, many people are taught to pop a pill.
Oh gosh, yeah.
To take painkillers.
Yeah.
Well, we have a painkiller epidemic. Okay, so if we're able to teach people how to move and not become reliant on the medicine or other things that people fall.
Sufferer, and I get extremely bad headaches as well, and I know that if I feel that headache coming on, if I get on my mat and start doing some specific movements, some of my gentler Pilates movements, I can let that, I call it evaporating, I can let that headache evaporate and I'm fine. But that's not our autopilot, is it?
But it's a learned skill. And, I also have worked with a couple of, chronic migraine clients who know if they don't get in for their sessions, they're more at risk for getting their migraines.
For sure.
Right. And how does that work then? How is Pilates stopping migraines?
There's lots and lots of different reasons. So we're encouraging people to breathe more. And so often, if we're not getting the oxygen, if we're not, then we're going to get headaches. The breath reduces stress, the movement reduces stress, exactly. And then also we're bringing much more awareness and movement to the head, neck and shoulders. And we got a lot of stuff going on in here, and a lot of it's shut down because of working head forward at computer screens, which we've talked endlessly about.
And I think it also goes to that mind-body connection, the physical with the mental and the emotional. And that is where the research is still evolving and growing. And there's, we know bits, and there's just this whole new world of research that we're just beginning to fully be able to scientifically prove. And we see it in the results of our clients.
And how do you think we can start to change that traditional belief of you've got pain, you've got an injury, therefore you should rest? how do we get that message across, or how do we start to do that, that movement heals? And also, just to add to that, and I'm sure it would be the concern of most people, because this is what I would be thinking, how do I know if I do that I'm not going to make it worse?
So Pilates, I think, and I was thinking about this before, that actually we encourage people to move, don't we? And actually people,
Gentle movement,
it's
not
gentle,
silly movement.
it's not silly movement, but also people are doing more daft things out in the real world, more vigorous, more uncontrolled movements than they are when they're in a Pilates class with us. So
Getting in and out of a
people say,
car.
how many times have people said to you, it was my back went when I picked up the laundry basket, my back went when I was lifting the baby out of the cot? It's those sorts of things that people are doing, unthoughtful, not mindful movements. That's when injuries are occurring, not when they're concentrating, not when they're supervised, not when they've got high quality instruction. Remember, we are world leading instructors here at the studio, world leading. So that means that the supervision in very small classes, 6 and 8, in fact, is our absolute maximum number in a class. So we're working tiny. This isn't 30 people in a big group somewhere where nobody can be seen. Everybody is seen and heard. So they are supported in a controlled environment, not kind of liberated movement.
So that sounds like a really important point to me, that if you have pain or you have an injury, not just to go to a big Pilates class. Or
Yes. But I think the other thing, I have a client who just unfortunately was in a car accident, and luckily she's okay. It could have been a lot worse. And she went to go see a physio, and the physio said, no, don't move, which I just cringe. And so, they're like, yeah, just take some time off and rest. But because she'd been coming to me for now 4 years on a consistent basis, she did. And she's like, I cannot believe that's what they told me. I said, well, unfortunately, a lot of physical therapists don't maybe have the same kind of experience or training. So to answer your question, how do we get this message out and debunk this myth? It would be amazing if we could get more doctors, GPs, orthopedics, physical therapists to come in and experience the movement and how we teach. But until it happens, I think we're going to have a huge information gap.
We definitely are, but I mean, the little things, all the little things accumulate over time, don't they? And I think us having the podcast is a big thing. This is a great opportunity. So listeners, it's like you can be part of this change and part of the help by sharing the podcast. We can write blogs about it and put it onto the internet. We can share on our social media. We can keep doing the right thing in the front line and have clients recommending. The little things are what we can certainly do in the short term. And I think that there's a project to be had for getting out there to GPs and things. So we'll work on that.
Brilliant. Well, we usually end each episode with Claire shares 3 pearls of wisdom that we'd love people to take away from today. But today I would also like to hear Whitney's wisdom. So Whitney, what 3 things would you say to someone who's experiencing pain to encourage them to try to do more Pilates or even come to Pilates in the first place?
I would invite them to come to my class or join me on a morning for a virtual session. I can talk to the cows come home, but it is something that you have to experience. So what do you have to lose? It's a 45 minute, 50 minutes out of your life. And what if that one class could be the change that would make the difference for the rest of your life? It's that simple. It is that simple.
That's amazing.
It is. Any other words of motivation?
It's simply that simple.
Just try that one class and that could be the class.
Love it.
Brilliant. Yeah,
That's
I love that.
Whitney.
And Claire, what 3 things would you say to motivate customers who are experiencing pain? What would your advice be to motivate them to move more?
I would say, ask your body. ask your body, listen to it and ask your body first. So, I often say to people when they ask, that is it right or should I do this? I ask them, if you could know the answer, what would the answer be? And usually we know we're just looking for reassurance. And I'll say, I can reassure you. And you really know the answer. So listen to yourself.
It's that intuition.
Intuition, of course. But it can be so dulled down.
It's switching on that part of the brain.
It's switching on that part of your brain. And I would say, and we've said it repeatedly, all of us today, which I just love it, is that movement heals. Remember that movement heals and motion is lotion.
Oh, and our issues are in our tissues.
And our issues are in our tissues. There we go. We've got one today. Oh my gosh. And then following on for that, if you think about, if we relate the movement in our body to brushing our teeth. So we know that when we all know to brush our teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, you get a buildup of plaque. Your body is building up plaque. If you don't move it, it gets stuck. It gets stagnant and it gets toxins blocked in it. So you feel unhealthy and immobile in lots of different ways. So you must do movement like it's brushing your teeth. So that's my 3.
Brilliant. Whitney, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show today and sharing your story so honestly. It's truly inspiring to hear how Pilates helped you to turn around what could have been a life-shattering experience.
Oh, it's been amazing.
I'm 100% sure that you've motivated people today to think about ways in which we can have agency over our own bodies.
Absolutely. And honestly, Whitney, it's so motivating and inspiring to hear your story and to know how much impact Pilates has made on you in every way and how that's then triggered you to be able to help so many people, because it's a joy. Like, you come in, you would never know any of this story because you come in radiating positivity. And everybody comes out of your classes radiating that positivity.
100%.
100%.
You're gonna be calm now.
But it is truly, truly motivating. And I think our listeners are going to really have learned a lot from hearing your story and seeing how far you've come. So thank you so much for sharing. So we will be continuing with the theme of motivation in our next episode, and I look forward to sharing more then. And in the meantime, let us know what you think of this episode. Like, share, do all the things you know you need to do to help other people find us. And we'd really love you to let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.